Tantor Audio presents The Saint by McCarty. Narrated by Antony Ferguson. Foreword. The year of our Lord 1308. After 2.5 years of war, Robert the Bruce has waged one of the greatest recoveries in history. Against nearly insurmountable odds, with the help of his secret band of elite warriors known as the Highland Guard, he has defeated both the English at Glen Truel and Loudon Hill, and the powerful Scottish barons who stood against him, namely the Comyns, MacDowells, and MacDougals. In October, the Earl of Ross is finally brought to heel, submitting to Bruce, who now holds Scotland north of the Tay. With England's new king, Edward II, busy trying to rein in his troublesome barons, and his brother Edward Bruce keeping watch over the troublesome south, King Robert enjoys a well-earned reprieve from battle. But Bruce's hold on the crown of Scotland is anything but certain, and in a realm filled with enemies both named and unnamed, peace is merely an illusion. Soon Bruce will face the greatest threat to his life yet, and once again he will call upon the legendary warriors of the Highland Guard to save him. Prologue. Inverbrakie Castle, Ross, Scottish Highlands, August 1305. Magnus MacKay caught the movement out of the corner of his swollen eye, but it was too late. He couldn't get the studded leather targe around in time to shield himself, and the war-hammer landed with full, bone-crushing force against his left side, sending him careening head first into the dirt. Again, and this time with at least a few broken ribs. Behind his own grunt of pain, he heard the collective gasp of the crowd, followed by the anxious silence as they waited for his next move, if he had one. A broad shadow fell across him, blocking out the bright sunlight. He gazed up into the menacing visage of his enemy. "Had enough!" the Sutherland henchman taunted. Every inch of him had had enough. Magnus hurt in places he didn't know he could hurt. He'd been bruised, battered, and hammered to a bloody pulp, but he wouldn't give up. Not this time. For 5 years he'd suffered defeat at the hands of Donald Munro, the Sutherland champion. But not today. Today the prize was too important. Magnus spit the dirt out of his mouth, wiped the blood and sweat from his eyes, and gritted his teeth against the pain as he dragged himself back to his feet. He wobbled, but through sheer force of will steadied and shook the stars clear from his vision. "Never!" A cheer went up from the crowd. Or half the crowd, that is. Like the rest of Scotland, the clans gathered to watch the Highland Games were divided. It wasn't Robert Bruce and John Comyn that men took sides with today, however, though both of Scotland's claimants to the throne were present. But the parties to an even older and bloodier feud. The Mackays and the Sutherlands. "Stubborn whelp," the other man said. Magnus didn't necessarily disagree. He lifted his targe in one hand and his hammer in the other, and prepared for the next blow. It came, again and again, like a battering ram. Munro was relentless. But so was Magnus. Every time the fierce warrior knocked him down, he got up. He refused to surrender. He'd be damned if he'd come in second to the braggart again. The Sutherland henchman had been a thorn in his side since the first games in which Magnus had competed 5 years before. Magnus had been only 8 and 10, and besting the heralded champion, who was 5 years older and already in the prime of his manhood, had seemed an impossible task. But Magnus was no longer a stripling lad. In the last year he'd added considerable bulk and strength to his lean, muscular build, and at a handful of inches over Munro's 6 feet, Magnus had the advantage in height. The scales were no longer so unbalanced. He'd already acquitted himself well at these games, winning the foot race and sword challenges, although the best swordsman in the Highlands, Tor MacLeod, was absent, and placing among the top 3 in the other competitions with the exception of swimming, which was to be expected. Magnus hailed from the mountains of northern Scotland, and the islanders dominated the water events. But this was the challenge Magnus had to win. The hammer event belonged to Munro. He'd dominated it for nearly 10 years. It was his pride and dominion. And wresting the crown from his nemesis's head to claim victory for the Mackays would make it all the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?